Hey guys, so I'm sure you're used to using compression on your drums, and you probably know what happens to the sound of your drums when you overcompress. But you might not be so familiar with the fact that just using the compressor itself can affect the sound of the drums a bit. And one compressor versus another may cause certain frequencies to become overemphasized or de-emphasized. So what we're going to do today is we're going to do a deep dive on 5 popular plugins. We're going to look at the API, the UA1176, the FabFilter, the Fairchild, and the DBX166 compressor. We're gonna run through all 5 of these on a few different program materials, and we're just gonna see how does it actually affect the sound of the drums. Okay, so we're gonna start with this project. This is from a song that I did with one of my bands. This is something that I've already done all the mixing for and everything already. I currently have the API plugin used on this, and we'll get into how I have that set up in a second. But first, let's just get into a little bit of the program material. So there's going to be 2 sections that we're going to be jumping back and forth between for comparison's sake. We have this one section here. This is the second verse. I got a little beat going. There's a little bit of double bass thrown in there as well. And then a little bit earlier, we have this section here, which has some toms going on, and then there's straight double bass that gets thrown in after. Let's jump into how I have the compression stuff set up. Now, I am using some compression directly on the snare and the bass drum, but we're not going to focus on that too much today. What we're going to do is we're going to look more at drum bus sort of thing. Now, as you can see, I actually don't have on my drum and bass drum buses. I don't have compression on it directly. I do have a separate dedicated drum compression bus. Now, I've talked about this in a different video before, but this is set up in like the New York style compression or the parallel compression. So how does that work? That means that I have, for all my drum tracks, I have a send going to the drum compression bus. Now, I have it all flattened out right now for sake of this example. So once this is set up in the bus, you have basically your drum and your bass drum. This is dry. And then your drum compression, we kind of consider this to be your wet, right? This is going to be heavily compressed, and then you're going to dial this in to the mix afterwards, right? For taste, right? You know, how much you need it to kind of stick through and whatnot. So let's first focus on just how this sounds, just the drum compression bus, not without the dry drum and bass drum. Now, by the way, just to kind of reiterate, I do have the snare, the bass drum, all the toms, even my overheads, hi-hat, and ride are going into it. Now, sometimes you might not actually include these, or you might dial down the send level that you drive into it. But for sake of this video, we're going to kind of drive this all into it pretty heavily so we can kind of hear what a general full mix might sound like. Let's just take a quick listen here. So now, obviously, I have that bus cranked way up. I wouldn't normally have it that hot, right? Because I would want to have a lot of the dry in there. But you can kind of hear how it sounds, right? It sounds a bit overcompressed. And when you go to do parallel compression, that's actually what you're going for on that bus. And then you're going to mix it in after. Now, let's take a look. Let's compare this. Next, I'm going to bring up the UA1176. We're going to do a comparison to see how do the two sound in isolation, right? How does the API sound? How does the 1176 sound in isolation to each other? And then how do those affect the sound when you bring it into the drum mix and then you bring it into the full mix? Now, for for settings sake, I'm going to try to go with settings that are somewhat similar to the API. Now, obviously, I can't get it exactly, but what are we looking at here? Well, we're looking at something that we're working with a fast attack, a fast release. This has a compression ratio of 10:1, so I'm going to have to go back and forth between the 8 and the 10 to kind of see how I like it. And I think I was driving down the signal maybe to the -6 dB mark. Let's just take a quick check there. Yeah, it's obviously it's jumping all over the place. Okay, so I got this setting. I think worked out okay now. So let's we're gonna work with this normal drum beat. We're gonna flip between the API and the UA. We're just gonna listen to how it affects the sound. We're gonna start with the API. So I'd say the bass drum is still pretty snappy on the two, not too bad of a difference there. Let's start to throw this into the drum mix and see how it affects the sound. So we'll go back to starting with the API. I'm going to keep the bus level up pretty high relative to the dry right now, just so it's a little bit easier to hear. So I'm hearing it's almost like on the hi-hat. It sounds like the pitch of the hi-hat is changing ever so slightly. It sounds a little bit higher pitch to me real quick. You know, when I'm just listening right now, it sounds a little higher pitch on the API compared to the UA. Let's throw in the full mix here and see what that sounds like. Yeah, so I think it's doing something similar there. It sounds like maybe the low end stuff like the bass drum doesn't sound all too different, but the once you're getting into like the mid highs, I think it's starting to affect the sound a little bit. Let's switch over to the tom section. Let's see if we can notice any difference there. So again, we are going to turn on just the drum, just the compression bus to start with. And then we'll build everything back up again. So here, once the heavy double bass and toms are going, I feel like the low end is kind of like, it's kind of choking. It's losing its definition. It's losing its attack. And, you know, it looks like it's kind of getting compressed roughly the same amount. The aspect ratio, the ratio is a little bit higher on the UA, of course. But it seems like the gain reduction is relatively the same between the two. So obviously that means that on the UA, if we're using it in the full mix, I expect that it's going to be a little bit less clarity on using that one versus using the API. But let's give that a test. Let's throw in the dry drums and let's take a listen. Yeah, you know, of course it's not as noticeable because I have the dry drums in, right? So the dry drums is helping to kind of undo a little bit of that drum compression. But obviously, if you are having something that starts to be in a dense mix and the drums are getting lost, then you might have to look to see if you're using an 1176 there, switching to an API. The API 2500 might help out. Let's go and switch this into the full mix, and let's take a listen, starting with the API. Yeah, so the API may have just a little bit more definition there. I think it sounds a little, it retains a bit more of the attack sound, the natural attack that you've got going on. It's not choking it as much. All right, so we've looked at those quite a bit. Let's throw on another compressor. This is going to be the DBX 166, which is another popular classic compressor. Now we want to use this plugin, of course, in a similar way compared to the others, or we want a similar setup. So we can certainly get the compression ratio to be the same, right? We could make this be about 10:1. But you'll notice that there isn't a release and attack setting on this guy, right? So we're just going to have to now basically drive the threshold amount so we get the gain reduction that we're used to on the API. And we'll kind of just compare how that sound ends up being compared to the other two plugins. All right, so I've got the threshold level set, and I'm doing some makeup gain here to try to get the playback level a little bit similar to the others, so we don't have a volume thing throwing us off. So let's just take a quick listen right now, starting with the DBX. So this has a similar effect as the 1176 did. Right, where when that double bass really starts to come in, it seems like it's choking things. In fact, I feel like it's even more emphasized here. That it's more of a problem. It's really choking. It's almost like it's getting quieter when that double bass goes in. Let's do a quick compare to the others real quick. Yeah, so that could definitely be an issue in the mix. Now, let's just jump ahead a little bit. Let's take a listen to this other section in isolation. Yeah, so it seems like just how this plugin is working, the output levels is a little bit different on the DBX versus the UA. Even though I try to get the output levels to be the same, it seems like when it's just the regular drum beat and the bass drum isn't choking it, it's the playback level is actually a lot hotter than that UA was. Let's compare that again. Yeah, and the API output level seems to be a little bit in the middle between the other ones compared to the DBX and the UA. Now let's take another listen and just really listen to how it's affecting the sound of the drum. So we'll start off again with the DBX. Pitch-wise, it sounds a little bit like, if I'm just listening to the hi-hat, I think it sounds a little bit closer to the API. But even here, it's got that really over-compressed. It almost makes it sound like, I mean, they're all over-compressed to a bit, right? But it sounds a lot deader on the drums even here. Whereas I thought the UAD of the 1176 didn't sound as dead in this section. So let's throw this back into the full drum mix and take a listen through them. Yeah, so in the mix here, it's not as bad. It's definitely handling a lot better in this section compared to the tom section. Let's jump back over into that. And now let's give the full mix a listen. Yeah, so I find it's just got a little bit more definition on the API compared to the other two. Let's listen to that, the groove section. Yeah, again, I think they all fare a bit better on this section. When that double bass and toms are going, it seems to really be killing the compressor, and it's choking it. The API seems to handle that better. Now obviously there's some difference in like which frequencies it's emphasizing, I said there would be, so that's kind of going to be more of a matter of personal taste, but you'll just kind of have to keep your eye out on the program material, because that might dictate what kind of plugin you're going to have to use depending on the situation. All right, so let's throw up another compressor. This is another really popular one, but it's not used that much on drums. So let's give it a listen, see how it plays. This is going to be the Fairchild. Now, one thing to note when you're messing around with this, when you're setting this up, there is a mix setting here. Since we're using this as a bus, we do want to make sure that this mix is at 100%. Right, we don't want to have like some dry and some wet in here. We need this to be all wet for our configuration. Again, there is no release or attack settings. What we're going to do is we're going to leave most of this other stuff down here alone. This is basically how hard some of this threshold stuff is, like basically the knee setting. We're going to leave that alone. We're going to focus on the input gain and threshold to try to get basically the same gain reduction that we saw on the other plugins. All right, so I am back at the tom section. I got this plugin all set up. I got just the drum compression bus turned on and just the just the Fairchild enabled. So let's take a listen to how this one sounds. So real quick, I actually think that this is handling the low end a little bit better than the 1176 and the DBX. I think it's not choking up as much. Let's pop in and out between the other ones just on the bass drum, just with the double basses. Yeah, so I think that one's actually doing pretty good there. Let's rewind it a little bit and throw in the dry drums. Yeah, I think it's actually not doing too bad of a job there. Let's jump. Let's throw in the full mix actually. Yeah, I think it's not doing as bad of a job. One thing to know is that the API when it's driving on the double bass, it's not just floored stuck on that like the -10 gain reduction position. It's kind of it's still got a little bit of air. It's kind of coming back and forth a bit. Whereas some of the other ones, they just are like floored there and they're just stuck there. So that might be why the API is handling that plugin a little that sound material a little bit better. Yeah, and you'll see on the Fairchild, it's a similar sort of thing. It's not just stuck at whatever gain reduction level it is. It's still got a little bit of motion going on. Let's listen to the groove. Let's compare this to the 1176. Yeah, so I think it's having a little bit of an effect on the hi-hat sound. API still sounds a little bit, it still sounds like the frequency isn't getting kind of pulled down, or is not emphasizing the lower frequencies on the hi-hat there. Let's take a quick listen to that Fairchild in the full drum mix. So it's not doing too bad. Actually, so far, I've never used the Fairchild on drum mix before, but I'm actually kind of really liking it here. Let's go and listen to the full mix now. So not too bad. We got one last plugin to look at. This is going to be the FabFilter compressor. I've gotten these not too long ago. I used them on this project for some mastering stuff, but I haven't used the compression stuff too much. I've been actually focusing a lot on using the limiter and the EQ. So this is going to be a little bit of a new thing for me. So let's just take a quick look at this compressor. So here we do have attack and release settings. So we're going to want to drive that release and attack to be pretty quick. We got threshold and ratio. So yeah, let's take a look here. Let's drive this up to about 10:1. Let's make the attack and release pretty quick. Let's go back to the API real quick just to see what we had in here. So this was 0.03 and 0.05, basically as fast as this thing could go. So for sanity's sake, we will make these be about the same. Oh, I can't get it down as short as the other plugin, but that's okay. All right, so let's just take let me spend a minute and try to get the threshold and output settings right. All right, I got that all ready to go. Let's take a quick listen. We're gonna have just the drums playing again and just the drum compression. And this is back at the tom section. Real quick first impression, it seems to be handling the bass drum pretty good, much better than the DBX and the 1176. Let's compare it to the API and the Fairchild, since those ones were faring better as well. So I have to say the FabFilter right there sounded a lot more responsive than the Fairchild, and I actually was kind of liking the Fairchild. Let's compare the FabFilter to the API. So that's pretty interesting. The FabFilter is knocking down the gain, supposedly just as much, right? Isn't it? According to this, is knocking it down by 12 decibels. But it still doesn't actually sound like super over compressed. It actually reminds me a little bit of using like a Empirical Labs distressor, where you can throw a lot of gain reduction at it and it doesn't screw up the sound. So this is actually. It sounds a lot more natural, a lot more of the attack seems to be getting through here. Let's throw this into the drum mix. Yeah, I think. Let me just check that again real quick. Yeah, there seems to be a ton more clarity on the FabFilter compared to the others. Let's throw in the full mix here. Yeah, so the FabFilter sounds a lot more natural. It seems to be handling the high gain reduction a lot better. All right, we got one last thing to look at, and that is the FabFilter in the groove section and see how that handles things. So let's go back to having on just the drum compression bus. We're going to play just the drums in the mix. Let's give this a quick listen. Yeah, again, it doesn't sound nearly as choked on the FabFilter. Let's buzz through some of these other settings. These other compressors real quick, and we're just gonna see how they all sound. I'm guessing that they're gonna sound more choked than the FabFilter, just based on this kind of first quick run through. But let's see whether or not I am surprised. Yeah, so the FabFilter sounds a lot more alive, a lot more natural. Let's throw this into the mix. And by the way, the sound of the hi-hat, just listening real quick, the sound of the hi-hat seems comparable to the API. So it doesn't sound like, some of those other plugins, it sounded like it was maybe like making the hi-hat sound kind of like lower pitch or something. So the FabFilter in that regard sounds pretty natural. Let's throw in the full mix. So yeah, I mean, I wasn't expecting the FabFilter to be this behave this well. Same thing with the Fairchild. Actually, the Fairchild I thought did pretty good. I was kind of going into this thinking that the three typical compressors you would think of for drums, the API, the 1176, and the DBX, that those would actually probably fare the best of the group. But I was a little surprised by the Fairchild and really surprised by the FabFilter. So was there any particular compressor that you guys had a favorite for? Something that you thought maybe colored the sound in some way that you really liked? If so, then let me know in the comments below. I'm putting out other videos like this, by the way, all the time. Other helpful videos for drummers and play-alongs and adding drums sometimes to popular TV show themes. So if you don't want to miss out, then don't forget to subscribe. And until next time, peace.